Days ago, my wife was asking me about this presentation, if I was prepared for it. And I wasn't sure why she was interested in this one, because I do several presentations, but she seemed to take interest in this one. And I said, well, what are you concerned about? And she said, well, you know, she comes from Penang, my wife, and she said, you know, Malaysian people don't mind paying for food. They don't mind paying for tuition for their kids, but they're not going to pay and watch you give us presentation. So I said, yeah, but I think they're going to be offering some food. And I also think you get 2 points for your PAM point. So the pressure's a little bit off of me. So, you know, 10 years ago, I was working for a company which had its headquarters in Budapest, in Hungary. And the company was doing a lot of developments around Europe. And the CEO of the company was talking to me and said, you know, I think we need to get on this green thing. It looks good for our shareholders and on our annual report. And I said, yeah, good idea. And he says, I think we should start by making our headquarters building a green building. Somehow it's going to be low carbon building. And our headquarters building in Budapest was a very old building. And I thought, okay, how am I going to do this? So I left the meeting and I was thinking, okay, I'm going to have to get some of the greatest minds to come into this building to work out how to turn this building into something which is low carbon. So I got a checklist of some architects and engineers which I thought we'd need to bring on. And I went back to him and said, okay, I think I need a budget to take on some of these great people. He said, no, Mark, it's okay. I already have resolved the problem. I said, what do you mean? He says, well, I found a company where I could pay them, and they're going to develop some forest in South America. And with that forest, we're going to offset our carbon use of the building. So now the only thing you need to do is go buy a gold plaque to put at the entry which says this building is now carbon neutral. So that was easy. The company I work for now, Unibail-Rodamco, this is the very large development company. We're the largest real estate company in Europe. And again, my CEO of this company made a crazy statement after the Paris Agreement, saying, we're going to reduce our carbon emissions by 50% by the year 2030. So that's in about 13 years. And he said this to the market. And my company is traded on the Paris Stock Exchange. It's one of the largest companies on the Paris Stock Exchange. And guess what happened to the stock price after he said that? Huh? Went down? No. The stock price went up for some other reasons. But you know, the stock market and the investment community looked at us very positively. If you're really going to make this commitment, you must be a forward-thinking company, and sounds like a company we want to invest in. And also, many of the big investment houses have regulations which say they have to invest a certain amount of money in companies which are aiming at carbon neutrality or at least reducing their carbon. So this allowed them to invest in a real estate company which had a very strong program to reduce carbon emissions. I said, yeah, it's great that you told the market this, and you know, I'm happy that the stock price has risen, but it's impossible to do. You cannot reduce our emissions by 50%. We have billions and billions of buildings. How are we going to do it? He said, I don't care, Mark, how you do it, but we have to do it. And you've got 12 years to do it in. And we all know how long buildings take. You know, if we have to hit this target in 12 years, we need to be doing it now. So what was the first thing I did? Imagine you're in my situation. You're responsible for a lot of buildings, and now you have to bring all these buildings, let's say the future buildings, down by 50% carbon emission. So what's the first thing to do? The first thing I did was work out sorry, that slide hasn't come through, but basically, it doesn't really matter. Are there any engineers here? Exactly, so I can skip this slide, because it was really for the engineers, because I had to give them something before I start to show some nice pictures of buildings. But basically, it was a formula to calculate what the current situation is in terms of our carbon emissions today, so we can work out how to make a 50% reduction in that. And this formula is not easy at all. And it looks easy for some people, but it's not easy. And every company who's really committed to reducing their carbon emissions needs to work out this kind of formula for themselves, because it'll be slightly different for every company. And if you look at we were talking earlier, the presentation before, about the different agencies which exist to measure how good you are at reducing your carbon, they don't really get into the depths of this formula. Basically, the formula is working out what is the carbon content of every single material you have in your building, multiplied by the amount of that material you have, divided by a certain area of building. But you have to decide which area of building to use. So it's a complicated formula. But anyways, we got through it, and the conclusion of this was that more or less, on average, all the buildings in our portfolio were using about 800 kilograms of CO2 per square cubic meter of volume of building. So if you want to reduce this by 50%, you have to go from 800 to 400, which is not possible. And now the next slide I'm going to show you is the slide which saved me. And it's probably the most important slide of my presentation, because as a real estate developer, when we're looking at reducing carbon emissions, we're looking at the whole way in which carbon is used around our buildings. This slide didn't come through. But I want to explain this slide. I don't know why it's not showing up on this thing. But basically, what it's saying is that of a building, there's the 100% that a carbon that's used of a building, only 10% is from the construction. So 10% of the carbon that comes out of our building is from construction. 30% is from the use of the building. So 10% is the building of the building, 30% is how you use it, and 50% is from the way people drive and arrive at the building. So if 10%, only 10% of the carbon is coming from the way we build it, that puts a lot less pressure on the need for us to use carbon neutral materials in the building, because it only affects 10%. The real big driver is the way people get to the building. So if we can reduce the travel and the way people arrive at our buildings, we'll have a dramatic decrease in the amount of carbon they use. Which means now what we're saying is that our future buildings are going to be on locations where we have public transport. They're going to be in places where people can walk to, and in places where you have less and less car traffic. That will be the biggest driver for reducing the carbon output of our buildings. The second big driver is during the operation. And we talked a little bit before, there was a presentation about lighting and how we can save on operation costs. But the real way we reduce our operation costs is the energy that we buy from the energy providers. So if the energy from the energy providers goes down and becomes green, we'll automatically save 30% of our carbon. So 30% of the carbon saving will come from the energy provider. 50% of our carbon saving is going to come from reducing the amount of vehicle or traffic to a project, which means that only leaves us with about 10% for the construction, which was a big advantage when you're committing to the market to reduce your overall carbon by 50%. Reducing by 10% of the construction, if we look at the construction, do you know where most of the carbon in the construction of a building is? Most of the carbon in the construction of a building is in the concrete and the cement. Am I right, my fellow colleagues, presenters? Yeah. Most of it is in the construction of the cement and the concrete. The other one is the steel. And we need concrete and steel when we build buildings, so that's a bit of a problem. But when you look, there's 10% of the overall carbon output of our products comes from construction, and of that 10%, most of it is in the concrete and the steel. So we're trying to use different methods of concrete and different methods of doing steel. Maybe we don't do steel, maybe we can use wood, maybe we can use something else. And in concrete, there's different materials you can use to do the binding of the concrete, which uses less energy to make the concrete. So that's where the big win is going to be in the construction. The carb is the cement and the steel. The actual finishes that we use in the building, the stone and the ceiling, don't make up that much of the construction carbon out footprint. So we weren't so much concerned about that. So looking at how we go about getting this overall carbon footprint down, knowing now that I'm going to be focusing on 10% construction, 30% operation, 50% on traffic. You know, a building like this is an existing building in Germany, which my friend Frederick, who's sitting here, he's presenting tomorrow. He helped me with this project, actually. Well, this is not your design, by the way, Frederick, someone else. This is an existing building in Germany. This is a great building for carbon, for hitting our carbon targets, because it's existing. And our carbon targets are for everything we do from today onwards. And if you can reuse an existing building, all of that concrete and steel which you see there, as long as you reuse it, is already gone. It's already there. You're reusing it. So you've already hit a huge chunk of your carbon. So the next objective for this is how do we reduce traffic coming to this building in terms of cars or leaving it? And what our objective is to turn this building, which is actually, when we bought it, it was a building which was a shopping center underneath underneath some residential houses. The shopping center was not being used. It was empty. There was no tenants. If we could turn this building into a destination for the people who live there, then those people will no longer be driving away to go to their shopping, restaurants away from this area, but would stay in this area, and would reduce our carbon footprint because we have less people leaving the district. So by creating a destination which is better, we can go back to our carbon calculation and say, look, by the effect on the carbon reduction is the fact that people will stay here. So we started looking at how we could improve this thing. And this is a south-facing building, so it gets lots of sun. We thought if on this level is one level above, and this is the level where people enter below, so it's a split level. If we could open all of this outdoor space, which is south-facing, which is good in Europe because you get a lot of sun, you can extend the hours and you can use restaurants. If we could turn all this into a restaurant area, it could become quite a nice destination for people of the region. And these steps which come down, which are kind of grand in a way, we could keep the concept of the steps, but turn them more into something like an amphitheater. So people are sitting out, having their restaurants sitting on these steps. And if we could destroy some of this concrete and cement, which we don't like very much here, so the entrance is at one level, maybe the steps which come down could wrap inside the entrance, so you have an entrance which is inside and outside, to make the whole space feel more lively. So this is how it is in the end. And so what happens is the steps are retained, but just redone in a kind of more amphitheater-like way. People can come out, they can sit here. The steps wrap into the building, so you have the feeling of inside and outside. And we open up this space here. So it's all an existing building, just demolish some things, change the steps. And we have a destination, which is now very popular. People are staying in this location, they're not leaving. We've reduced our carbon. On top of that, the other thing we're trying to do is, this is the steps. As you come in, these are the steps outside, the steps coming inside, is to blur a little bit the edges between the inside and outside of a building. Because if you have the feeling you're going from outside to inside, you're also expecting a radical change in the temperature. So if it's hot outside in summer, you want to be cool inside in a comfortable air conditioning. If it's cold outside, you want to be hot inside. But we're finding more and more, the more we blur the outside and inside, that differential of shift, our customers are not expecting it so much. So a customer coming in here in winter might keep their jacket on a little bit longer. And if we can shift the degree of cooling of the inside of our building, it will reduce a lot our operational costs. Another project I'll show you, this is in Frankfurt in Germany, is we were going to do a parking at the top of a shopping center. We're going to do a parking on top of a roof of a shopping center. And we thought, well, if we can argue, because of the location of the shopping center next to a public transport, so we argued to the city we want to reduce the amount of cars coming to the center, which is good, again, for our carbon. And we could turn this car park into something more interesting, like a garden. It'll also allow us to maybe push some restaurants up onto the roof, which works well in this location, because in Frankfurt there's a lot of skyscrapers. People in the skyscrapers can look down onto this roof garden. And so while they're working, they're thinking, I'm going to go to that roof garden during my lunchtime break. I'm going to have some food at the restaurant, and it could even be a garden where I go and walk and do things. And what we're seeing is that people who live and work in this area start using this garden as their area for recreation. So you have dance classes and so on happening on the roof. So we've turned what was a car park into a roof, is gaining us a lot of points in terms of the carbon reduction. We have a lot of out-of-town shopping centers, which we're trying to fix. This one, it's in Vienna. There's a seating area of restaurants outside here next to the car park. So these are all restaurants with a car park in front of it. We're trying to reduce our amount of car parking because less and less people are coming by car. We're providing stronger and stronger public transport. So we're doing a lot of refurbishments of areas outside of car parks where you turn places which were car parks into places which are now more convenient for eating and restaurants, which again makes people want to stay in this place longer, less driving, reduces our carbon. In Paris, where my headquarters are, this is the Champs-Élysées. I guess some of you have been to Paris. Champs-Élysées is the great axis you have in Paris, leading from the Arc de Triomphe, which is in this direction, all the way through down to the CBD district, which has all the towers. My company has a building here, which is a Palais de Festival. It's a conference facility like this one here, one of the biggest conference facilities in France. And in front of the conference facility is a big, large roundabout, which is killing this axis and is a real nightmare of traffic. So we went to the city and said to them, look, we want to reduce this roundabout if we can. It's the city's roundabout. So here's what we're proposing. The roundabout becomes a main central road. We get rid of the roundabout, which continues the access. The park, which is the Parc de Boulogne, which is a very big park in Paris, we're going to extend into here. So here's the park extending into that, where that roundabout is. And of course, we want to extend our building here to extend the amount of real estate we have. So we went to the city saying, look, we're pushing for this. We will build this. You give us more ability to build more real estate, and we'll do it. So we're working with Christian de Ponsonpark, which is an architect in Paris, at extending, this is the edge of the building, extending the building with this extra piece of building, which makes this access from the Arc de Triomphe stronger, where before it was a roundabout, brings the park into this here, and we get the opportunity to do more building. This is the extension of the building on the edge. So this was the old facade. On top of that, we want to open up a space in front of the building to create a plaza, which is a new entrance to our festival hall, and an entrance to a complex which is offices, hotel, and shopping mall. And this is the new main axis which is strengthened through here. So this space, by creating an urban space in a place which was originally a roundabout, we're saying we're replacing cars roundabout by urban place people. We have 2 lines of metros meeting at this point, so we have a lot of public transport. So together with the city of Paris, who has a long-term vision that the amount of cars will reduce, we're also pushing for a reduction in cars and replacement with open public space. This is part of can also go towards our counting towards our strategy of reducing our carbon. In Hamburg, does everyone know where Hamburg is? Hamburg is in the north of Germany, a very wealthy city, a port city. We are part of the city has a plan to refurbish and redevelop a big part of its southern edge, which is all reclaimed land. This is a large multi-use, multifunctional project, which has several buildings. I don't know if we have any developers here, but if you're a developer, the edge of the plot is next to the waterfront, which is always a difficult thing to do when you're a developer. For an architect, it's fun because you have water in front of it. There's a lot of things you can do. But for a developer, it's very difficult because it means all of your customers need to come from this side, from the north. You can't catch any customers from the south. So you're basically building a project next to a natural boundary, which is the water. So all your customers have to come across from the north. So you've cut off half of your catchment. It's a very difficult project to work from a development point of view. So this is the plot, which sits here. This is the existing building. So all of that is the plot of land. The Herzog and de Meuron, the new opera hall, which you might have seen in some magazines, is here, which has just been opened. And we're trying to think of how to create a series of buildings which will work within our new strategy of 50% less carbon output. So our big thing is to try and say, okay, we're not going to have much car traffic here. How do we get people into this project from all the different, let's say, non-carbon using mechanisms to get here? So metro, bus, bicycle, walking, and the whole design of the project is a series of buildings has been designed to look at where people will be entering from those areas, those ways of moving in. The frontage next to the water, we're using different architects. We've got Christian de Ponsonpark, who's designing a hotel and a tower, and we've got UN Studio, who are doing two two of the office towers. So we've got a whole series of architects who've come in and designed different buildings. But the real trick to this project is how to create all the spaces which work between the buildings. And that's where we have decided to get a curator, art curator, meaning someone who is responsible for kind of creating the glue between the buildings. Because we think if we can create a series of spaces between the buildings which has a certain cultural quality, we'll attract people more into this area. And what we're trying to do is to attract people in and to keep them there. So you live there, you work there, you shop there, you eat there. Everything happens in this area. So you don't need to drive in or drive out. You find everything. So we've got a curator, an art curator who's coming in and saying, okay, this is the location where we're going to have artwork. And we're using artwork and graphics and elements of the buildings to create the character of this district, which is separate from the buildings which are coming down to the ground. So you'll have a memory of the place through all the different artwork, and somehow that's going to lock you in more, and you're going to stay more. All the streets which are shopping, actually it's a shopping mall, but the shopping mall has been designed like open streets. Again, it's not going to be air conditioned, so it's going to be naturally open. We're going to have a roof, but it's going to be naturally open, so it's going to have the feeling of a street, but it's more or less a shopping mall. So we're going to reduce our operational costs in terms of heating and cooling. We're hoping, and it's a big risk for a developer, because we invest a lot of money in these projects, that the customer will be as comfortable in this environment as they are in an air-conditioned or heated shopping mall, which is difficult, because we all like to go to air-conditioned heated spaces. But by having a very strong architecture, by having a very strong glue and cultural element to this project, we're thinking that people will actually feel better here than they would in an air-conditioned or heated shopping mall. Even the way we're doing the roof, this glass roof in the mall, we're allowing the columns of the glass roof to come down in the mall, which I don't know if we have any shopping mall design experts here, but having columns in your mall is a thing which shopping mall operators hate. But we felt, to make it feel more authentic, to make it feel like you're really in a building which works, we have the columns of the roof structure coming down in the mall. And our feeling is the columns will be placed where people can stick up little pictures, my cat is lost or something like this, to make it somewhere where people start to inhabit and feel and take as their own and not have the desire to leave. We're playing also with this project and having different levels. So you enter one of, we have these different buildings and the entrances happen in different areas. This is an entrance into a department store, but there's a road which rises up for cars and drop off to a hotel district. So you enter in, but you can walk in underneath this. So there's a mixture of indoor spaces as well as outdoor, which are working together. So we can get a kind of mix of indoor-outdoor spaces to improve the quality of the place. Another mixed-use project we're doing, this is in Brussels, next to the Heysel Stadium, which anyone is a Liverpool supporter will know this stadium, infamously, for a very tragic event which happened there. But we have the land around the project, and we're doing a mixed-use project of shopping mall and office tower and residential. And what we're looking at is that when you come out of the metro, which is very important, that we give our customers who come out of the metro a variety of opportunity for different experiences. They'll come in, they can enter directly into the shopping mall. They can walk up and above and go on top of the shopping mall to a garden, which gives them access to all the residential towers. Or they can stay along the street and walk and actually enter into different series of shops and restaurants along the street. So the shopping mall is a classic shopping mall, which can work very well with nice double height shop fronts and views up into the garden. Walking up to the garden, which sits on top, you can actually go from this garden down into the shopping mall. And from the garden, you can enter directly into your residential houses. So the garden's also a destination within this. And along the street, it opens up to parks which open up onto the street with restaurants along the edge. So we're trying to create destinations. I think we talked, the last slide that you showed, about how to create the city of love. We're trying to think how we do that with these different variety of destinations. Some are indoor, some are outdoor, some are on the roof. And another project I wanted to show is that also we're trying to look and gauge how much customers are willing to accept materials which look reusable or more eco-friendly. Because one of the challenges of being a developer is that when you sell your project after you build it, people often look at the specifications. I don't know if any of you ever bought a residential house, but I've seen the specifications normally in Malaysia when they're doing residential houses. The specifications are very clear that, you know, the toilets are marble, the taps are gold. So people want to see the materials. And are we able, because we want to sell these projects on the market for very high prices as well. And we also have people who say, well, what material is it? You know, if we start selling projects which look like this, which are not traditional high quality projects, you know, a lot of landscaping. The landscaping looks kind of rural, rustic. A lot of wood in the materials, and so sometimes this cannot be perceived well in the investor or resale market. People say, well, what kind of material is it? Why am I paying all this money for materials like this? So we're gauging a little bit and hoping that the trend and the customer taste is changing. So it'll allow us to use these materials and actually argue that, no, this is a high-value destination, even though the materials might not be what you expect. I mean, it is driven a lot by the younger generation, you know, and the desire now more and more to find places, destinations which feel more honest, they feel more real. I mean, this is a food court, a modern food court outside of Paris that we're trying to develop, which is nothing like a food court. It's all outdoors, and Paris is pretty cold in winter and pretty hot in summer. But we're willing to risk that an outdoor food environment, which looks natural, will work actually better than an indoor one. So somehow changing in customer taste is giving us the ability to, again, reduce our carbon footprint. Even in some of our indoor, this is an indoor mall. You know, this is a food court. And it's a direction we're going in which I'm a little bit concerned, but I realize why, is that this is a completely new building, but we've designed it to look like it's an old shed. It's an old barn. Because this is more and more popular, we're finding, with people. That people like to use places which have a history, which have been reused. And we're going down a little bit of a dangerous track. It's something that I think we need to change, is that we don't have enough old buildings to occupy, so we're building new buildings which look like old buildings which they can reused. But as a way, the principle is nice, that, you know, the feeling is more rustic, it's more honest in the materials, it's lighter, it's not so heavy. You know, we're avoiding the use of gypsum board, which is very carbon intensive, using reusable. It's more and more popular, this kind of look, which is quite encouraging. Even in, you know, some of, you know, the briefing that I'm giving to architects now is more like, look, I think the architectural style that we're trying to find is something, try and make the building look as lightweight as you possibly can. You know, make it look like you are using as least material as possible, because we think somehow the new aesthetic, which is coming with this drive for more green efficiency, the new aesthetic is going to be lighter. So a lot more wood, a lot more natural materials, ceilings which look like they're floating. We're seeing that more and more as being something which is popular with our younger customers. And even on the interiors, trying to bring reusable materials on the interiors, trying to bring green into the building so it feels fresher. Our feeling is that, you know, our objective of reducing our carbon output also has an objective of our customers feeling like they're healthier. So you need to feel healthy, and there's no way better to feel healthy than when you enter into a space which feels natural and healthy. So natural light, natural materials, we think makes our customers feel healthy, which we think is also part of the kind of objective of making our overall products feel more carbon neutral. This is a project which we're doing in Basel, which is a city in Switzerland, which sits on the border between France and Germany. So you have 3 countries meeting at one point. And we're trying to create a project. It's a shopping mall just outside of Basel, which we're trying to attract customers from Switzerland, Germany, and France. So it has to be quite a destination. And we're looking and trying to work out what type of building now do people want to go to. And it doesn't really look like a building. It's a building in a park. And really, we're thinking more that people don't want to necessarily go to a building. They want to go more to a park. So how can we make the experiences you have in a park more come into the building? So we're working with Richard Rogers on this one. And I mean, the facades of the building, this one, we still haven't worked out what facade to do. This building facade is wood. We're thinking of using wood, which is kind of a curvy facade out of wood, which I like very much. Our concern is that wood can look good, but it can age very badly. And also when it rains, the wood stains and changes color. We're concerned about that. I'm unable to convince my company yet to use wood in the facade. If any of you guys have any ideas to help me with that, I'd be very happy, because I think wood in the facade would be very interesting for a commercial building. And we're looking at also glass. Now, glass is very carbon heavy, but maybe there's ways we can recycle glass. And in this part of the world, in Basel, which is near to Alsace, the big wine-producing part of France, I was thinking, could we somehow use all the glass, which is all this recycled wine bottles, are we able to use the glass in the facade? So we're looking at that now with the architects to see if we could get glass would actually be less carbon, is more carbon neutral than the wood, because it's recycled glass in the facade. I know the facade has all the strong entrances that you need for a shopping mall. But on top of that, from the side, you can also walk up onto the roof. So we're trying to make our buildings now more livable in different areas. You have entrances, like in the last project in Brussels. You can enter into an enclosed world, or you can go up onto the roof where you have a series of restaurants, or you can actually go around the side if you want. You can go around the side of the building around here, and you find restaurants which are overlooking an area where you have a small little agricultural plot. So food which is prepared, which is grown here, gets taken into the restaurant to be eaten. People want to feel that more natural, they feel more organic. So to try and make that happen more with our food courts in our shopping malls. And then this garden, which is part of the whole experience of visiting the center. So it's not just about going to the center, but it's a whole day of recreation with garden and building and food. And even on the inside where we have, this is a food court, you can see the materials we're using is, again, wood, recycled. Also a roof which can open and close, so that in the summer you can open this place up and it becomes more natural and outdoors. We think this is more the future of what people are looking for, and of course it's going to reduce our operational costs. This is a project we're doing in Prague, in Czech Republic, and it's a tricky one. And I put this slide here because I thought I could maybe get some advice from some of the architects here, because we did this project a few years ago with an architect called Vingards from Stockholm, from Sweden, a very good architect. It was a competition. It took us years and years of planning to get this far. In European cities, to get projects of this scale to get built is very difficult. And it's a fantastic building, and this is the entrance to the building. And it was finished, the design was finished, we got all the approvals, we've got all the permitting to go forward, but this was done before we made the commitment to 50% reduction in carbon. So I'm not sure what to do with this project, because we like the project very much. We've got all the approvals. If we go back into a very complex phase of redesign, it could hurt the chances of the project happening. So what we've briefed Vingard, the architect, is to say, okay, look, we like the project. Are we able to do this in a more carbon neutral way? So just like the project I showed you in Bâle, we're looking at, because this is glass. We're looking at, can we find reconstituted glass? Can we get glass which is recycled to put in the building? Which is something we're investigating. And I think, from what I hear, I think it's possible. I don't know if you guys have any ideas. Because from a point of view, it's a shopping center and office complex. From the point of view of an urban project, it's fantastic. We have the entrance here. We have a level above where we're going to have breakout spaces above. So you have people on levels above which are also overhanging the entrance. It's a very interesting project. And Prague is a great city of architecture, so we want to keep it. But if anyone has any good ideas on how to keep these kind of facades, because we don't just want to do wood, rustic-looking buildings. We want to still keep a modern, fresh look to our buildings, and we want to use glass. And France is one of the countries which really pioneered the creation of glass. So we're really looking to how we can use glass in a carbon-neutral way. This is the existing shopping center in Lyon, one of the most visited shopping centers in the world. It's huge, it's old, and it looks tired. We got the architects from Holland, MVRDV from Holland, to look at this, and we asked them, okay, what should we do? We are going to tear down this ugly facade and do something completely different. But then, talking with them, we said, well, that's not a very carbon neutral way of approaching an existing building. Like I said before, if you can use your existing materials, and that's all concrete, it's all cement tiles, if we can use that and not tear it down, it'd be much better for us. And also for the city, they've been living with this building for this little formation, these little patterns they have here. You see it everywhere in this building. In the city, they know it. The building belongs to them. They use it. We have almost 150,000 people a day going into this place. MVRDV said, well, let's wash it, first of all. We'll wash the whole facade. We'll repaint it white, which always looks cool. And we'll change the motif a bit so that this motif, which we have everywhere, will start to break it up a little bit when we come to the areas of glass. So, this is the existing motif you see here, where the whole building is now being repainted white. So that ugly thing becomes white. And the motif breaks up where we have glass opening, so it becomes transparent. So somehow we haven't thrown out that horrible facade. We've kept it, which is good for our carbon. It's kind of good because people remember it. And, all these corners and edges start to open up with this motif. So this is one of the edges in here because it opens up. And even up where we have food and restaurants, we break the facade up just above where the restaurants are, and it kind of breaks up on this side. I had a big debate because I was on site a week ago, and we were debating, should we paint it white or should we paint it a darker color? Because the problem with white is it gets dirty early. But in the end, I said, no, we paint it white. That's the risks you have to take when you want powerful architecture sometimes. I said, it's better for a white building to become dirty than for a funny, dark, yellowy building to stay clean. Is that the correct thing? You guys are architects. This is a project outside of Geneva in Switzerland, which is a little bit crazy. The whole thing is it's a completely new build, and we're trying to build the whole thing out of wood, so a wooden shopping center. And we're using architects from France who are specialists in wood. I'm hoping it can work. The whole roofscape is a park, which, at the very first building I showed you where we did a roof on top of a building in Frankfurt, we know how expensive it is to do a roof on a building. It's not cheap. So you better be getting some very good returns on having a green roof like that. But a whole building out of wood, you're seeing it more and more. And I think that technology is going to become stronger, and we're going to see more and more of it. Our biggest concern is what I said before. Does this kind of building have a high value in the market for investors if we want to sell the project? And the final project I'm showing you, this is a project in Geneva. It's a shopping mall with some offices and a big cultural center outside of Geneva. This is the project here, and there's some undulations in the land, which we're trying to keep. So the land is undulating, and we're trying to see if we can build this building up and down on the land, and also carve out a little bit underneath. So from inside, when you go in, you actually enter the project here, and behind here, there's actually a shopping mall behind here, but somehow the tops of the shopping mall pop out in these different little buildings, which pop out on top. And inside of each of these buildings, you can have dedicated restaurants, which, we're trying to say to the interior design regulations for the restaurants, all the interior design has to be in reconstituted wood, so there's a kind of consistency of the interior language, but also it feels like you're in a building which is natural. Each interior could be quite a nice restaurant with views over the Alps in the distance. And the interior of the mall, which is a classic mall, we're trying to use wood on the floors, stone where we can, wood paneling along the sides of the escalators. So the whole aesthetic of what a project looks like, especially a shopping mall, we think is going to change more and more and more. And of course, in this part of the world, not like here, you get really bad weather. And even in winter, these buildings somehow glow, they feel nice. It feels like a nice destination to go to. Because at the end of the day, like what the previous speaker said about cities of love, if we can make our products places where people really want to go, and they'll stay there and not use their car to go somewhere else, we're going to hit the biggest part of our objective of our reducing our carbon emissions. Okay. That says finished, by the way.